I want you to just picture a number in your head for a second. $83,000.
Right.
Because for decades, if you hit that number, which is the median household income in the United States right now, there was this like cultural promise attached to it.
Oh, absolutely. It was the finish line.
Yeah, exactly. The finish line of financial anxiety. The promise was that 83 grand meant you get the salary, you buy a little starter home, you have a couple of kids.
Maybe take a summer road trip.
Right, a road trip, and you still have enough left over for a decent retirement account. It was the literal architectural foundation of the American dream.
It was supposed to be the definition of solid ground. Like the assumption has always been that if you are earning right in the middle of the pack, well, the economy is basically designed to work for you.
Exactly.
You aren't incredibly wealthy, but you're insulated.
Insulated, that's the perfect word. But I mean, if you're listening to this deep dive right now and you happen to earn somewhere around that median, you know that the ground does not feel solid at all.
Not even a little bit.
It feels like you're walking this financial tightrope without a net because you're making what historically is a fantastic living, yet one bad Tuesday, like, I don't know, a blown transmission or an unexpected root canal
Can completely wipe you out.
Right. It feels like an existential threat. So for today's deep dive, we are pulling from this massive stack of sources to figure out, well, why?
And we have a lot of data today.
We really do. We've got the latest Bureau of Labor Statistics data, demographic reports from the Census Bureau, this completely fascinating retrospective from the Social Security Administration on poverty metrics, and a really deep cybersecurity white paper on global telecom infrastructure.
It's a very diverse stack of research, but I mean, they all converge on this one staggering paradox.
The paradox that makes you feel like you're losing your mind.
Exactly. Because the government looks at a family earning $83,000 and categorizes them as thriving. And to prove it, they point to the official poverty line. For a family of four, the federal government defines poverty as earning just over $31,000 a year.
31 grand.
Yeah. So just mechanically, if you earn $83,000, you are making, more than double the poverty limit.
Which is where the absolute disconnect happens. Because you read these macroeconomic reports and, like, the politicians and economists are giving each other high fives.
Right. They're saying, look, median income is up.
Yeah. But the microeconomic reality, like the actual lived experience of trying to survive on that income today, is suffocating.
It really is. So the central question we have to answer today is, if 31,000 is the official definition of poverty, but 83,000 feels like drowning for millions of households, what is broken?
Have our lifestyle expectations just spiraled out of control?
Or is the benchmark we use to measure poverty entirely detached from the modern economic reality?
And we are going to find out. Our mission today is to just completely dismantle an $83,000 budget. Forensically audit where every single dollar goes. We're going to explore the really bizarre 1960s origin story of that $31,000 poverty line.
That part is wild.
Oh, it's insane. And we're going to explain a devastating economic trap known as the benefits cliff. And by the end of this conversation, we'll look at the math that explains why an income of almost $130,000 might just be the new baseline for avoiding systemic poverty.
But, to get there, we really have to throw out a concept that most of us were taught in high school economics.
Okay, what's that?
We need to stop talking about discretionary income.
Discretionary income, like the fun money.
Right. The old model of thinking assumes you pay for your basic survival, and whatever is left over is your discretionary fund, right?
Yeah.
To manage, to save, invest, spend on hobbies.
But that's not how it works anymore.
Not at all. Our sources suggest a much more accurate lens for the modern world. It's this concept of participation costs.
I found this concept in the reading incredibly clarifying because cost of living sounds so passive.
Yeah, it does.
But participation costs sounds like a toll.
Because that is precisely what it is. Participation costs are these unavoidable, non-negotiable financial tolls you just must pay simply to exist, log into society, and legally participate in the modern economy.
They are the prerequisites for holding a job.
Exactly.
Cool.
And keeping a roof over your head.
So let's actually put this into practice. Let's do the autopsy on that $83,000 median income.
Let's do the math.
Because I think people hear 83 grand and they mentally spend 83 grand. But the reality starts with a massive haircut.
Oh, right off the top.
Before you even see your first paycheck, you are hit with federal income tax, state income tax, and, payroll taxes for Social Security and Medicare.
Which obviously fluctuates wildly depending on whether you live in, say, Texas or California.
Right, right. But on average, your actual take-home pay immediately drops to the mid 60,000 range. Let's be generous and just call it 65,000.
Okay, so that 65,000, that is your actual universe of resources. That is the finite pool from which 365 days of human survival must be funded.
And the absolute largest predator in that pool is housing.
Unquestionably.
The data shows that nationally, the median homeowner with a mortgage spends a little over 21% of their gross income on housing. And this is but that's a national average. That includes homes bought like 20 years ago.
Yeah, people who locked in prices in 2004.
Exactly. If you look at the modern market, say you live in New York or California, it's closer to 36%. In Hawaii or DC, it's around 35%.
We really need to pause on that 30% threshold, though, because it's not just a random number.
Oh, right. The cost burden thing.
Right. In macroeconomics, 30% is the universal threshold used to define a household as officially cost-burdened.
Meaning what exactly?
The mechanism behind it is that once housing consumes more than 30% of your gross income, the mathematical probability that you will default on other obligations like medical bills or credit cards just skyrockets.
You are structurally stressed.
You're officially structurally stressed, yes.
And here is where the reading gets incredibly dark, because that 30% threshold is mostly being breached by homeowners, who at least are, building equity.
Right, they have an asset.
But for renters, the math is horrifying. The median renter in the U.S. is currently spending 31% of their income on housing.
So they are starting off cost-burdened.
Starting off. And the census data highlights this specific, completely chilling statistic. 12 million people in this country are spending more than 50% of their income just on rent.
Half their income. Gone.
So let's run the numbers for our hypothetical family trying to rent a standard apartment in any major economic hub. You're easily looking at $25,000 to $30,000 a year. Let's use a conservative $28,000.
Okay, let's track the ledger here. We started with a $65,000 take-home.
Yep.
We subtract that $28,000 for rent. Your entire resource pool is now down to $37,000.
Almost half your physical cash. Just gone. Just to have a door that locks at night.
Right.
Okay, next up is transportation. Now, I used to think of a car as like a consumer choice, You choose to buy a Ford or a Honda.
Or you choose to take the bus.
Exactly. But the infrastructure of the United States, unless you live in the absolute densest parts of Manhattan or maybe Chicago, it is fundamentally structurally built for the automobile.
Because zoning laws over the last 70 years systematically separated commercial districts from residential neighborhoods.
Right. You literally can't walk to work.
Public transit in the majority of the country is just not a viable mechanism for reliable employment. If you want to earn that $83,000 salary, you must be able to physically transport yourself to the place that pays it.
So the car is a prerequisite for the income.
Exactly. It is a participation cost. And for a dual income household, which is usually necessary to hit that 83 grand in most places, you almost always need two cars.
And the cost isn't just the monthly loan payment either.
Oh, no.
We're talking about fuel, auto insurance, which has absolutely exploded recently, by the way.
It really has.
Routine maintenance, tires, annual state registration, and the interest on the financing. The Bureau of Labor Statistics bundles all this, and it easily drains another $10,000 a year for a household.
So we had $37,000 left after the landlord took their cut.
Right.
We hand $10,000 over for transportation. We are now down to $27,000.
$27,000. And we still haven't addressed the two financial burdens that are probably the most uniquely aggressive in the American economic system.
Healthcare and childcare.
Yes. And the healthcare math alone is enough to induce a panic attack.
It's staggering.
The average total premium for an employer-sponsored family coverage plan in 2025 is nearly $27,000 a year.
Right. Let's break down how that mechanism works, though, because it's largely invisible to the employee.
Yeah, explain that, because people don't see 27 grand come out of their checks.
Right. The employer is usually subsidizing the bulk of that $27,000 premium as part of your overall compensation package. But the worker's required contribution, The amount pulled directly out of your paycheck is still roughly $6,800 a year.
And I want to be crystal clear with you about what that 6,800 actually buys you.
Basically nothing.
It's just the premium. It is literally the subscription fee you pay just to hold the plastic card in your wallet.
Right.
That money vanishes before you have seen a single doctor, before you've picked up like a single generic prescription, and long before you have met your $3,000 or $5,000 family deductible.
It's just the cost of entry.
Yeah, it's the ultimate participation cost. You can't risk modern life without it because a single medical emergency without insurance would lead to absolute bankruptcy. So you just pay the toll.
Okay, so we take our remaining $27,000 and we subtract the $6,800 just for the health insurance premiums.
Okay, carrying the one.
Our family is now down to roughly $20,000.
They started with an $83,000 salary.
I know.
And now, if this family happens to have kids, they hit the final boss of the American economy, childcare.
The economics of childcare are fundamentally structurally broken.
They really are. The current average cost for center-based childcare is over $10,000 per child annually.
And in high-cost states, it regularly exceeds $15,000 or even $20,000 per child. It literally rivals and often surpasses the cost of in-state college tuition.
I was reading about why this is so expensive in our sources because I think a lot of people just assume daycare centers are price gouging.
Right, they assume someone's getting rich off it.
Yeah, but they aren't. They operate on these razor-thin margins.
Because it's an industry constrained by rigid physical limits. Like in manufacturing, if you want to make more TVs, you build a faster machine, you scale up.
Right, efficiency.
But you cannot automate watching a 2-year-old. Legally and ethically, there are strict staff-to-child ratios.
Like 1 adult for every 3 or 4 infants in most states.
Exactly. You have massive facility overhead to meet safety codes, and liability insurance is just astronomical. The service simply cannot be provided cheaply in a free market without massive public subsidization.
Which the U.S. largely does not provide.
No, it doesn't.
So the cost gets passed directly to the parents. If you have a 2-earner household with 2 kids under the age of 5, you are adding $20,000 to $30,000 in expenses.
So let's use the conservative end of our data for the ledger. Let's say $20,000 for 2 kids.
Okay. We had $20,000 left in the account, minus $20,000 for childcare. We're at 0.
The budget has mathematically flatlined.
$0. And I really want you to think about what we haven't paid for yet.
Groceries.
We haven't bought a single gallon of milk or a loaf of bread. We haven't paid the electric bill, the water bill, the internet bill.
No clothing.
We haven't bought shoes for the kids. And we certainly haven't put a single dollar into a 401k or a rainy day savings account.
Not?
The entire $83,000 median income was consumed just by logging into the system.
Which is why the anxiety is so high.
It's terrifying.
When 100% of your income is locked into fixed contractual expenses before the month even begins, you aren't actually managing money.
What are you doing then?
You're trapped in a system where you act as a biological conduit.
Wow. A biological conduit.
Yeah, your primary economic function is to wake up, go to work, collect wages, and immediately pass those wages along to your landlord, your auto financier, your health insurance provider, and your child care center.
I was going to call it the subscription model of life, but biological conduit is way darker.
It's accurate, though.
It is. It's like how software used to work. You used to buy Microsoft Word on a CD-ROM for $100 and you owned it forever. Now you have to pay $15 a month for the rest of your life just to type a document.
Right.
That's what the middle class feels like now. You aren't buying a life. You're paying non-negotiable recurring subscription fees just to exist.
And the kicker is, you cannot cancel the subscriptions.
Right. If you cancel the car, you lose the job.
If you cancel the childcare, one parent has to quit their job to stay home, which instantly cuts the household income in half, making the rent impossible to pay. It is a completely locked ecosystem.
Okay, but the physical costs, right, the rent, the car, the daycare, those are just one half of the equation we researched.
The other half is digital.
Yes, because our stack of sources included this massive cybersecurity report on telecom infrastructure. And, I mean, it completely changed how I viewed the subscription we're all forced to pay.
Because earning an income today doesn't just require physical participation. It requires a mandatory digital presence.
Right, the digital participation costs. You can't apply for a job, you can't manage your bank account, you can't even pay your utility bills today without relying on cellular data and a permanent digital identity.
A smartphone is absolutely not a luxury anymore.
Not at all. Try applying for a job at a warehouse or a fast food restaurant today without a working cell phone number or an email address. You literally can't do it. You must have a phone.
But here is the terrifying part of the research.
Yeah, lay it out.
The digital infrastructure we are forced to rely on is fundamentally porous.
Porous, meaning leaky.
Very leaky. The report highlights that over the last 5 years alone, there have been over 16 major data leaks from the biggest telecom providers in the world.
We are talking about Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, the giants.
The companies that act as the gatekeepers to our entire digital existence.
And the mechanism of failure here is what's truly fascinating to me. It's not just that hackers are getting smarter, right?
No, it is that the infrastructure itself is built on a foundation of vulnerability. Most major carriers don't actually own the entirety of the infrastructure they use.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they lease access to towers, they share networks, and they rely on archaic global signaling protocols like SS7 that were designed decades ago.
Back when security was like a total afterthought to connectivity.
Exactly.
Okay, hold on. Let me stop you there. I want to push back on this a little, or at least clarify. Because calling a cell phone network a systemic liability feels like a bit of a leap.
Oh.
Well, I get that telecom companies are greedy, and I get that data breaches happen. But, like, if someone breaks into my house, the house itself isn't a trap. It just means a criminal picked my lock. Why are we treating the cell networks as inherently dangerous rather than just occasionally victimized?
That's a great question. It's because of the way the architecture is designed. When you build a house, you put locks on the doors.
Right.
The mainstream telecom infrastructure was essentially built without locks because the priority was making sure any phone on any network anywhere in the world could seamlessly connect.
Ah, I see.
That open door policy means that your location data, your call routing, and your identity are constantly being broadcasted and handed off between dozens of third-party vendors who just lease the network space.
Oh, wow.
So you aren't just being occasionally victimized, you are paying a monthly fee to participate in a system that views your personal data as a monetizable asset, not a protected secret.
Okay, so the vulnerability is the business model itself.
Precisely. And this is where the market starts offering solutions, but only if you can afford them.
Right, the premium tier of privacy.
The cybersecurity report details a case study on a company called Cape. They were founded in 2022 by a group of telecom and cybersecurity experts.
And they realized the only way to fix the vulnerability was to stop leasing from the vulnerable system.
Right, exactly. The report mentioned that Cape actually owns its own mobile core. They built the foundation from the ground up, specifically prioritizing privacy.
And because they own the core, they can implement advanced mechanisms that standard carriers just can't or won't do.
Right, like they dynamically change a user's online presence daily.
It's basically digital camouflage.
Yes, every 24 hours your identifiers shift.
So hackers or even the global cellular networks themselves can't build a consistent tracking profile on you.
And it works internationally too. So if your phone pings a tower in Europe or Asia, you maintain that encrypted protection. Our sources even noted a detail about this. They offer a 33% off code EE33 for services like this.
EE33. But here is the macroeconomic tie-in that we need to look at. Stepping outside of the vulnerable mainstream infrastructure to access this level of secure, owned core technology comes at a premium.
It transforms privacy and digital security into a luxury good.
Which brings us right back to the participation cost. You are fighting a battle on two fronts. You have the physical toll, the rent, the healthcare, draining your actual bank account to zero.
Yes.
And then you have the digital toll, where you're forced to use networks that expose your identity. And the only way to genuinely protect yourself is to pay even more money for specialized premium infrastructure.
It creates an atmosphere of constant systemic vulnerability.
It's exhausting.
It really is. Whether it's the housing market pricing you out or the cellular network exposing your data, the infrastructure the middle class relies on is fundamentally built to extract value from the individual while shifting all the risk onto them.
Just talking about the math is making me sweat. So, I mean, if modern survival requires navigating a landscape that is this hostile, this expensive, and this fragile, how on earth is the United States government measuring poverty with a benchmark of just $31,000 for a family of four?
It makes no
I
sense.
cannot reconcile those two realities. Where did 31 grand even come from?
Okay, to understand the absolute absurdity of the $31,000 benchmark, we have to open up the historical documents from the Social Security Administration.
Let's do it.
We have to travel back to 1963 and look at the work of an economist named Molly Orshansky.
Yes. I was reading the actual memo Molly Orshansky wrote in the 60s, and it's honestly wild.
It's a time capsule.
It really is. I was looking for, like, complex economic modeling. I
Yep.
expected calculus factoring in rent variations, utility costs, healthcare premiums.
But she didn't look at any of that.
No, she didn't look at rent. She didn't look at healthcare. She literally just took the Department of Agriculture's minimal food budget and multiplied it by 3.
That was the entire formula.
I kept reading the paper looking for the rest of the equation, but that was it. Groceries times 3.
Let me explain the logic behind it, because in the early 1960s, the government conducted this massive household consumption survey.
Okay.
The data revealed that families of 3 or more spent roughly 1/3 of their total after-tax income on food.
So her logic was, well, if you know what food costs, you just multiply it by 3, and that gives you the total amount of money a family needs to survive.
Exactly. She used what the Department of Agriculture called the Economy Food Plan, which was designed for, quote, temporary or emergency use when funds are low.
So it's bare bones.
Bare bones. She priced out that emergency grocery list, multiplied it by 3, and declared that any family earning below that final number was officially living in poverty.
Okay, that is like calculating the cost of a brand new modern iPhone by taking the cost of the plastic casing, assuming it represents like 10% of the phone, and multiplying by 10, completely ignoring the microchips in the software.
It's an incredibly flawed way to measure a modern economy.
How is a literal grocery calculation from over 60 years ago still the foundational metric of our society?
Well, because it is politically convenient today. But we actually have to be fair to Orshansky's original genius here.
Really, defending the times 3 rule.
I will defend her 1960s logic, even while I aggressively condemn its modern application.
Okay, I'm listening.
You have to understand the economic environment she was measuring. In 1963, multiplying by 3 was economically sound because the structural costs of life were entirely different.
Different how?
Housing and healthcare were secondary manageable concerns compared to the daily cost of just putting calories on the table.
Okay, let's explore that. Because how could housing possibly be a secondary concern? Rent is eating 50% of people's checks today.
Let's look at the mechanisms of the post-war economy. In the 1960s, the median home price in the United States was roughly $20,200.
20 grand.
And the median family income was around $7,000. That means a house costs slightly under 3 times the annual household income.
Wait, 3 times. Not a 30% down payment. The entire house costs 3 years of labor.
Exactly.
Wow.
You had massive federal programs like the GI Bill, heavy subsidization of suburban development, think of Levittown, which created a flood of affordable housing supply.
So housing was just fundamentally cheaper.
Yes. Furthermore, employer-provided health insurance had expanded massively after World War II, but the actual cost of medical care was incredibly low.
Because medicine was simpler, right?
Right. There were no MRI machines, no complex biopharmaceuticals. A hospital visit was cheap, so insurance premiums were negligible.
Okay, and what about childcare? We just established that daycare is a $20,000 line item today,
In the 1960s, childcare was largely invisible to the market.
meaning you didn't pay for it.
Right. The structure of the nuclear family at the time, which was supported by strong labor unions and high wages for manufacturing jobs, meant that single-earner households were far more viable.
So one parent, usually the mother, typically stayed home.
Exactly. Because care work was unpaid labor performed within the home, it didn't require a market transaction. There was no $20,000 daycare bill because the labor was internalized.
Okay, so in that specific, historically weird bubble, if you could afford enough food to keep your family alive, the remaining 2/3 of your income genuinely was enough to cover a $20,000 house, a cheap car, and the occasional doctor's visit.
Right. And it's really crucial to remember how Orshansky herself viewed this number. She explicitly stated that this metric was designed as a floor.
Not a goal.
Right. She called it a measure of, quote, how much is too little. It was never intended to be a benchmark for middle-class comfort or economic stability. It was the absolute crisis-level baseline for bare survival.
It was a smoke alarm.
Yes, exactly. But society fundamentally transformed. The macroeconomy shifted, and yet the government just kept using the exact same food times 3 smoke alarm.
They never updated the formula.
Never. Every year, They simply take the cost of food, adjust it for general inflation, and multiply by 3. They have completely ignored the fact that the fundamental proportions of human survival have inverted over the last 60 years.
Which brings us to the broken multiplier, because this is the core of the whole episode. Yeah,
Yes.
sorry, the whole deep dive.
It really is.
Let's do the math on what happens when you take Molly Orshansky's underlying logic that we should base poverty on the ratio of necessities and actually input the economic realities of today.
Because the math here is where the entire illusion falls apart.
Yeah.
Let's start with the grocery bill. Today, thanks to the mechanisms of industrial agriculture, heavy government subsidies for crops like corn and soy, and globalized supply chains,
Mm.
food is vastly cheaper to produce than it was in the 1960s.
Okay.
Today, food consumed at home does not represent one-third of household spending. It represents roughly 8%.
Wait, 8%.
Yep.
So food has dropped from 1/3 of the budget to roughly 1/12 of the budget.
Ex-
I mean, I know everyone is complaining about the price of eggs right now, but historically speaking, food takes up a tiny fraction of our income compared to our grandparents.
Exactly. When people complain about grocery inflation today, they are experiencing recent acute pain. But structurally, over a 60-year timeline, food has become a very small slice of the pie.
The problem is what ate the rest of the pie.
Housing.
Housing has completely devoured the modern budget.
Devoured it.
Yeah.
Remember how in the 60s, a home was under 3 times the annual income?
Yeah. 20 grand for the house, 7 grand salary.
Today, the national median home costs over 5 times the median income. And if you go to the major economic hubs where the $83,000 jobs actually are, the ratio is catastrophic.
Oh, I know.
In Los Angeles, the median home is over 11 times the median income.
11 times.
In San Jose, it's over 12 times. In San Francisco, it's around 10 times.
So the idea that you can just multiply your grocery bill by 3 and have enough left over to cover an apartment in Los Angeles is mathematically delusional.
It is entirely disconnected from reality. Since the 1960s, home prices have outpaced general inflation by 2.4 times.
Why, though? Just greed.
The underlying mechanisms are complex. It's decades of restrictive zoning laws that made it illegal to build dense housing, a severe lack of starter home construction following the 2008 financial crash, and the recent influx of institutional investors buying up single-family homes.
It's a perfect storm.
Our source data points out a phenomenal comparison, actually. If a median home had simply tracked with normal general inflation since the 1960s, a house today would cost about $177,000.
$177,000 for a median home today. Just imagine the psychological relief across the country if a starter home costs $177,000.
The entire culture would feel different.
But instead, the actual median home price is closer to $431,000.
And it's not just housing. Look at childcare. Childcare costs have risen 153% since the year 2000 alone.
Just in the last 2 decades.
Right. Overall inflation during that same period was 90%. So childcare is hyperinflating. Health insurance family premiums are approaching $27,000 a year, also rising vastly faster than general consumer goods.
Okay, so let's tie this back to the Orshansky model. If we update her formula, if we acknowledge that food is now 1/12 of the budget instead of 1/3, and we use a multiplier of 12 instead of 3 to account for the hyperinflation of housing, healthcare, and daycare.
Big reveal.
What happens to the official poverty line for a family of 4?
If you apply her identical logical framework to modern spending ratios, the poverty line for a family of 4 skyrockets from the official $31,000 to approximately $130,000 a year.
$130,000. I really want you to let that sink in. Because if you earn $129,000 a year, society tells you that you are highly successful.
You're in the top tier.
You probably feel a tremendous amount of guilt if you are stressed about money at that income level. You think, I make 129 grand, I should be rich. What is wrong with me?
Right.
But based on the historical standards of economic stability, based on the exact same mathematical logic the U.S. government used to define bare survival in the 1960s, earning $129,000 is not wealth. It is the new baseline for avoiding systemic poverty.
This is a textbook demonstration of an economic concept called Baumol's cost disease, combined with a fundamental inversion of survival costs.
Okay, explain Baumol's cost disease, because that sounds exactly like what we're diagnosing here.
The basic idea is that in sectors where human labor cannot be easily automated or made vastly more efficient, like teaching, nursing, or childcare, The cost of providing those services will continually rise faster than inflation.
Because you always have to pay a human to do it.
Exactly. You can automate the manufacturing of a television, making it incredibly cheap, but you cannot automate the labor of a nurse or a daycare worker. So the things we absolutely need to survive: a roof built by human hands, medical care provided by human doctors, care for our children, those things hyperinflate. Meanwhile, the things we consume, flat screen TVs, fast fashion, digital entertainment, get relatively cheaper.
So we have an economy where a 65-inch 4K television costs $300, but the apartment you need to put it in costs $3,000 a month.
Yes,
And the government is using a generic inflation average that blends the cheap TV with the expensive apartment, masking the fact that the fixed costs of survival are crushing the modern household.
exactly. They average it out so it looks fine on paper.
Which brings me to a massive question. If the math is this undeniably broken, and economists have known about Baumol's cost disease for decades, why hasn't it been fixed?
Way.
Because I know from the reading that the government did create something called the Supplemental Poverty Measure, the SPM, back in 2011. So they did fix the thermometer, right?
They built a better thermometer, yes. The Supplemental Poverty Measure was designed to account for modern spending patterns.
Okay, how does it work?
It factors in geographical differences, acknowledging that rent in New York is different from rent in Ohio. It includes the rising costs of healthcare and childcare, and it also accounts for tax credits and non-cash benefits like food stamps.
And what does it show?
Consistently, year after year, the SPM reveals that millions more Americans are living in poverty than the official 1960s measure admits.
Okay, so they have the data. They know the $31,000 number is a lie. So they use the SPM to determine who gets help, right?
No, they do not.
Wait, what? Why build a more accurate model if you aren't going to use it?
Because of the trillion-dollar status quo.
What does that mean?
The Supplemental Poverty Measure exists purely as an academic exercise alongside the official measure. It does not replace it in law.
Are you kidding?
The legal eligibility for almost all actual federal and state assistance programs, Medicaid, SNAP, housing vouchers, childcare subsidies, still relies entirely on the broken 1960s framework.
Let's talk about the political mechanism here, because this feels incredibly cynical. It sounds like they are purposefully keeping the bar artificially low.
It is a matter of brutal budgetary mathematics.
Unpack that for us.
The official poverty line acts as the gateway, the rationing valve into the American safety net. Currently, Medicaid alone covers nearly 70 million Americans, costing roughly $900 billion every single year.
Huge numbers.
Food assistance through SNAP reaches about 42 million people and costs another $100 billion. The total United States federal budget is about $7.1 trillion a year.
So if you suddenly update the poverty line from 31,000 to, say, 80,000, let alone the 130,000 modern equivalent, what happens to the federal budget?
It immediately collapses.
Wow.
If you raise the poverty line to reflect economic reality, you instantly make tens of millions of middle-class Americans eligible for Medicaid, food stamps, and housing subsidies. You would double or triple the size of the welfare state overnight.
And we just can't afford that.
The existing tax base cannot support that expansion without fundamentally restructuring the entire U.S. economy.
So it's not a metric of poverty at all anymore.
No.
It's a budgetary dam. The government is looking at a massive flood of financial distress, and instead of building higher walls, they just redefine what underwater means so the spreadsheet balances.
That's a great way to put it.
The poverty line isn't measuring human suffering, it's measuring how much help the government is willing to pay for.
It is morphed entirely into a rationing tool. And the most devastating consequence of using an artificially low rationing tool is what happens to the people who are trying to climb out of poverty.
Because it traps them.
Yes. Because the government draws this hard, arbitrary line in the sand based on 1960s grocery prices. It creates a punishing mathematical trap. Economists call it the benefits cliff.
The benefits cliff. When I read the scenario detailing this in our source material, I had to read it twice to make sure the math was right.
It's unbelievable until you map it out.
It is essentially a penalty for progress. Let's walk through this step by step with a real-world scenario. Imagine a single parent with 2 young kids. We're going to take them on a journey up the wage ladder and watch what the system does to them.
Let's start at step 1. This single parent is working full-time, making minimum wage. Let's say they earn $8 an hour. That equates to roughly $16,000 a year in gross income.
At 16,000 a year, they are deeply, undeniably below even the 1960s poverty line.
Yes. And because they are so far below the line, the safety net actually functions exactly as intended.
They get the help.
They qualify for SNAP food assistance. They qualify for fully subsidized childcare so their kids are in a safe daycare while they work. They are poor, but the system is providing a baseline of structural support.
Right. But obviously, they want to improve their life. They're working hard, they take on extra responsibilities, they impress their boss, and they earn a major promotion.
Which brings us to step 2.
They get a massive raise to $12 an hour. Their gross income jumps from $16,000 to $25,000 a year. Psychologically, this should be a moment of absolute triumph.
But what actually happens to their resources?
They hit the first cliff.
Exactly. Their gross pay went up, but that new income crosses the strict, arbitrary eligibility threshold for food assistance.
It
SNAP disappears entirely.
just vanishes.
The marginal tax rate on that specific increase in income is astronomical. They earn more on their literal paycheck, but when you factor in the loss of food benefits, their annual net resources, the actual value of what they have to feed their family, plummets.
They got a raise, and the system mathematically made them poorer.
But they don't give up.
No, they keep grinding. Step 3. They push their wages to $15 an hour. They are now making about $31,000 a year.
They are basically sitting right on the official poverty line.
They feel like they are finally reaching independence. And then they get a tiny cost of living adjustment, just a 50-cent raise. They are now making $15.50 an hour.
And that 50-cent raise triggers the second and most devastating cliff.
Why?
By crossing that threshold, they lose their child care assistance.
Let's explain the mechanism of that, because this is the core of the trap. A 50-cent raise is worth about $1,000 a year in gross income, right?
Correct. But by earning that extra $1,000, they just triggered the loss of a child care subsidy that was worth perhaps $15,000 or $20,000 a year on the open market.
And it doesn't phase out slowly.
The subsidy isn't phased out gently, it drops off a cliff. So to keep working to earn that extra $1,000, they now have to find $20,000 to pay for market rate daycare.
Their disposable income instantly goes negative.
Instantly.
It's like a rigged video game. You grind, you level up, you do exactly what society tells you to do to succeed, and the game rewards you by stripping away your armor and taking half your health points. The marginal tax rate on that 50-cent raise is essentially thousands of percent.
It is a profoundly demoralizing mechanism, and the punishment continues up the ladder.
It gets worse.
Step 4. Let's say this parent eventually pushes all the way to $22 an hour. Now, public health coverage disappears.
They're kicked off Medicaid.
They are forced into the private insurance market, where they must absorb deductibles and premiums that were entirely absent from their budget at $8 an hour.
The psychological defeat of this is immeasurable. At multiple, predictable points on the economic ladder, earning a higher wage literally leaves this family with less ability to survive. You are punished for succeeding.
If we zoom out and look at the macro implications of the benefits cliff, it creates a massive invisible demographic. I conceptualize it as the space between.
The space between. I like that. Who lives in the space between?
Millions of families who make too much money to qualify for any government help, but who make far too little to actually afford market prices for housing, healthcare, and childcare. They earn $45,000 or $60,000 or $83,000 a year.
They are too rich for food stamps, but too poor to pay $20,000 for daycare.
Exactly. And because their income is above that archaic $31,000 line, they do not appear in any official poverty statistics.
On paper, they look fine.
On paper, they look like successful, stable, working class or middle class citizens. But in reality, because they have zero structural support and face hyperinflated participation costs, they're the most financially exposed demographic in the country.
Completely invisible.
Entirely invisible to the policymakers.
Usually when we talk about macroeconomic theories like this, we have to rely on academic modeling to guess what would happen if we changed the variables. We sit around and say, what if participation costs just vanished?
But recently, we didn't need theory.
No, we didn't. Our sources point out that we actually lived through a global, accidental experiment that proved exactly what happens when you remove the toll of participation.
Yes, the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns.
It provided a very brief, completely unprecedented glimpse into a modern economy where standard participation costs were suspended.
It was a bizarre financial era.
It really was. During those early months of COVID, the physical requirements of participation simply evaporated. The mechanism of the economy paused. Commuting stopped, so you weren't buying gas or paying for auto maintenance.
Childcare centers were legally forced to close, so parents suddenly weren't paying that $2,000 a month daycare bill.
There were no dry cleaning bills, no overpriced lunches near the corporate office.
And the macroeconomic result of that pause was immediate and staggering.
Give us the number.
The United States personal savings rate skyrocketed to a record 32%.
32%. In a country where we are constantly told that most people can't afford a $400 emergency, suddenly the savings rate is 32%.
Now, obviously, we have to acknowledge that government stimulus checks and expanded unemployment played a major role in that cash injection.
They absolutely did. But the data emphasizes that just as important as the money coming in was the money that suddenly wasn't bleeding out.
Yes, the evaporation of those baseline fixed costs allowed millions of households to experience something they hadn't felt in decades.
Genuine financial margin.
Exactly, that breathing room.
For a few months, millions of families who have been stretched to the absolute breaking point suddenly had the ability to absorb a financial surprise without it turning into a full-blown crisis.
It really highlights that the temporary peace of mind people felt during the lockdowns, amidst all the horrific health anxiety and global chaos, the financial peace of mind wasn't just because the government mailed out a $1,200 check.
It was the sheer visceral relief of not having to pay a daily toll just to exist in the world.
For a moment, the subscription to life was canceled.
It was the most vivid demonstration imaginable that the majority of the modern household budget is not discretionary. It is a structural requirement. When you remove the structural requirements, the middle class instantly starts saving money.
But then the economy reopened.
We all had to log back in.
And not only did the costs come back, they mutated. The squeeze returned with an absolute vengeance.
Let's examine the mechanisms of the post-pandemic squeeze, because it was brutal.
First, the cost of financing a life exploded. To combat the inflation caused by supply chain breakdowns and stimulus spending, the Federal Reserve aggressively raised interest rates.
Right.
This meant mortgage rates jumped from historic lows of around 2.88% in early 2021 to over 6.3% by early 2023.
And we have to combine that with the fact that the actual sticker price of the homes had surged during the pandemic.
Ouch.
So you aren't just paying double the interest rate, you're paying double the interest rate on a vastly more expensive asset.
Exactly. The mechanism of fighting inflation in the grocery aisle effectively destroyed the affordability of the housing market.
The fallout from that specific dynamic is highly measurable, right?
Very measurable. By 2025, homeownership was officially classified as unaffordable for a median income earner in 17 different states.
17 states. What was that number before the pandemic?
Essentially one, maybe two, depending on the exact metric. The map of affordability was completely redrawn in 3 years.
And then, once you finally navigate those interest rates and get the house, the secondary costs pile on.
Property insurance premiums jumped more than 5% nationwide just between 2023 and 2024 alone, driven by climate risks and replacement costs.
And healthcare resumed its hyperinflation curve. For the roughly half of all Americans who get their health insurance through their employer, the premiums in 2025 are about 26% higher than they were in 2020.
So the participation costs didn't just return, they took an even larger percentage of the paycheck.
But here is the illusion that trips up so many traditional economists. If you zoom out and look at the national income data right now, it actually looks deceptively positive.
It does.
The sources note that the share of U.S. households earning over $150,000 a year, even when adjusted for inflation, has actually grown. Meanwhile, the share of households strictly in the middle has shrunk.
So if you are a politician looking at that chart, you are popping champagne.
It looks like the middle class isn't dying. It looks like they are graduating.
Okay.
Fewer middle-income households, more high-income households. Everyone is getting rich.
But it is a complete mirage. It represents a fundamental misunderstanding of purchasing power.
Explain that.
Because you have to calculate what $150,000 actually buys in a modern high-cost economic hub. Once you deduct modern taxes, a $4,000 a month mortgage at 6.5% interest, $10,000 for transportation, hyperinflated healthcare deductibles, and a $20,000 childcare bill.
The money is gone.
A household earning $150,000 is not affluent. They are not taking luxury vacations to Europe or buying investment properties.
They are just stable.
Exactly. They are comfortable. They are insulated from immediate ruin. But they are not rich.
A $150,000 household in Los Angeles, New York, or Seattle today is living the exact same lifestyle, the exact same level of modest suburban stability that an $83,000 household was supposed to live a decade ago, and that a $40,000 household lived in the 1980s.
So people aren't graduating into prosperity. The benchmark is just moving away from them.
The absolute floor for achieving a basic, stable life has been aggressively pushed up to the $150,000 mark. The official poverty statistics say fewer people are struggling, but what is actually happening is that our definition of struggling simply hasn't updated to reflect the hyperinflation of survival.
The threshold for baseline stability is fundamentally outrunning the median wage.
Hmm.
And this massive gap between the $83,000 median income and the $130,000 reality of survival has massive structural consequences for the future of the nation.
Because when a society makes baseline participation this expensive, human beings adapt, and their adaptations alter the trajectory of the entire economy.
Let's summarize those macro consequences as we wrap this up. Because everything we've talked about today isn't just academic math on a spreadsheet.
No, this changes how an entire generation decides to live their lives.
Exactly. What actually happens to a society when $129,000 is the new poor?
First of all, as we mentioned, people delay homeownership. You have an entire generation of 30 and 40-somethings stuck in apartments, unable to build equity, which means they aren't building the generational wealth that funded the retirements of the previous generations.
And perhaps far more consequentially, they postpone or completely abandon having children.
Yeah, the birth rates.
The structural financial insecurity we are describing today is consistently cited by demographers as one of the primary drivers for the massive, sustained drop in birth rates the United States has experienced over the last 2 decades.
People look at the inescapable math of a $20,000 childcare bill combined with a $30,000 rent bill, and they simply opt out of parenthood. The math forbids it. It is heartbreaking that the desire to have a family is being vetoed by an Excel spreadsheet.
And it stifles the broader economy, too. It kills innovation.
How so?
When your family's health insurance is rigidly tied to your corporate job, and missing a single paycheck means you will default on your hyperinflated rent, you simply do not take risks.
Risk requires a safety net.
Exactly. You don't quit your secure, miserable job to start that small business you've been dreaming of. You don't move to a new city to chase a better opportunity because the rent in the cities where those opportunities exist is entirely out of reach.
The fear of losing participation locks people in place.
The overarching burden of these fixed participation costs creates a fundamentally risk-averse, stagnant society. We have built a macroeconomic system that heavily punishes volatility, even positive volatility like entrepreneurship or career mobility.
It all comes back to that image of the tightrope.
We are wrapping up this deep dive, and the synthesis of everything we've uncovered today is just undeniable. The numbers on the official government paper. The national GDP growth, the historically low 1960s poverty line, the growth of the $150,000 income bracket, they all paint a picture of a society that is richer and more prosperous than ever before.
But the daily, mathematical reality of everyday survival tells a completely different story.
The gap between the benchmarks we use to measure success and the actual cost of human participation is widening every single day.
Which leaves us with a final thought, something for you to deeply mull over the next time you hear a politician or a television economist bragging about how high the median income is or how low the poverty rate has fallen.
If our modern economic benchmarks are basically just fossils relics excavated from a 1960s economy that no longer exists, maybe it's time we stop measuring a society's success by its median income.
Maybe we need to throw out the old metrics entirely and start measuring our society by its resilience rate.
Resilience rate.
How many of our citizens at this exact moment could actually survive a single month of bad luck without losing their grip on stability?
I think that is the only metric that actually captures the truth. Because until we find the courage to change the measurement, we will never be forced to fix the reality.
Because right now, there are millions of people waking up every day, walking that tightrope, balancing an $83,000 median income, and looking down to realize there is absolutely no net. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.